brings to our next topic as of cultural appropriation. So we can start with that. Can a sober person write about a drunkard, and the other way around? Can an alcoholic talk about a regular life of a 9-to-5 family, stable routine? Because if it's not you, I think that's what cultural appropriation means. How far can you go? And then I will also drop this topic, because if it's fiction, by definition, fiction is fine, because all what you are doing is using your imagination, whether is it a clear reproduction of reality or not. It depends if that's so objective, but let's wrestle with this idea of how much can we put ourselves in someone's shoes if you never wore those shoes in the past. I start with you, Maria, for this.
Yeah, I think it's important to, if you don't have first-hand experience on something, to talk to someone who does. Make sure you understand what it means. Talking about being drunk, for example, like I myself have never been drunk. I wouldn't, be able to write it in a convincing way, I think, if nothing else. So I would make sure that I've spoken to someone and I've asked the right questions. Make sure that I understand what it feels like, what you could do while you're drunk, what you wouldn't do while you were drunk, just to get an idea and put it on paper. Again, on fantasy, it's easier because I can just invent a drink that has certain implications and has certain, makes people act a certain way, and then I'm scot-free. It can do whatever I wanted to do. But when you're writing about other things, and especially if it's something more emotional, like, I don't know, losing a parent, for example, I would feel very uncomfortable writing about it, because I would think, for example, maybe I'm, not giving it the depth that it deserves. So for these situations, I think I would like to speak to someone, just, make sure I understand it a little bit better. But the thing that you can always rely on is the experience, your first-hand experience, even if it hasn't happened to you, how you see someone going through something. Like, I've never been drunk myself, but I have been around drunk people. So I could write, for example, if I don't feel comfortable writing in first person about a drunk person, I could write the experience of someone seeing them do something or behave in a certain way, or how I perceive like someone who has had something very dramatic in their life that hasn't happened to me. And when, specific cultures are concerned as well, I don't like the idea of, us being limited to our individual countries. For example, like, I can only write about, Greek mythology. I could never, attend a retelling or inspiration from Nordic mythology, for example. I think cultures were meant to be shared, same as, food, or the idea of you have your friends over and you share a drink or something. I think those are activities and those are ideals that were meant to be spread around, as long as you're respectful. And by respectful, I mean, for Greek mythology, for example, something that bugs me a lot, because I have the utmost respect for the god of the underworld, but when you see him a lot of time being portrayed, people will, portray him as a very bad, evil person, and they say, oh, Hades, he wants everyone to die, he's on a campaign to kill everyone and have them all in the underworld. And this sometimes will upset me, because, okay, you want to use in a story, you want to make it about it, okay, but you have, in my opinion, and in this specific example, to explain why you're disrespecting the norm, because Hades, in this case, was a god that was very feared, but he was very revered as well, and he was considered fair on top of everything. And he did not want people to just die, because he had to manage the underworld and it had to be done a certain way. So he was very strict about the rules, but he never wished ill upon the world, as far as we know from, Greek writings, for example. So someone who just writes and really thinks that he was evil, or, for mythology specifically, maybe it's not the best example of cultural appropriation, but it's something that as a Greek would annoy me, because you're taking something that we know is a certain way and then you're twisting it into something else without explaining. Like, I could accept a story where it says, Hades, we know him to be such and such, but there was one example, there was one time in his life, for example, where he turned really, really evil, and then talk to me about that. But taking the whole thing, portraying it as something else, which is an issue, because Greek mythology retellings are a very popular thing these days in movies. We have like couple of movies coming up. You see lots of books around. or the idea, for example, that all Greeks do is sing and dance all day. It's that kind of thing that would bug me. I am very happy when people come to me and say, I went to Greece, or, like what you said, I like Uzo, or I saw that movie and I thought, oh, that seems really fun, and want to learn about it more. But when you take something and you twist it to something it really is not, and you believe it to be different, whether it is what I think feels like to get drunk or what you would think Hades is, I think there should be limits. I'm not saying make everything, try to make a story behind everything to explain everything, but there is a big difference between accepting something for what it is or for what it was and twisting it and taking it away from what it was. And when it comes to culture, it extends to music, to dancing, to the mythology, to the history. And like personally, the Greek is being in the center for a lot of like political and geographical debate. And it always feels bad when I see the culture not being respected for what it was. And, we're trying to make it something that it isn't. Or the Mamma Mia movies made everyone think that we just spend all our time sipping coffee and dancing around in islands. I'm very happy for people to explore it and for me to be a part of helping them exploring it. I mean, if they want. But I think there's a certain point as well where everyone goes crazy and they're afraid to touch something, as is the case, for example, with a great debate in the hair industry, braids. Some people say that braids originated from Africa and white women should not tie their hair in braids. And some people say, well, the Vikings were doing braids as well and they were completely disconnected. So if I do a Viking braid instead of an African braid, is that okay? And then you get like caught in this craziness. And for me, as long as you want to try something respectfully, or like I'm learning Japanese, for example, I'm a massive fan of the Japanese culture. I performed Japanese theater a couple of times. I'm learning the language. I'm reading on the history. If I would offend someone because I put on a kimono and I visited a temple to pay respects to something at a certain time of year, for example, that would hurt me because I'm doing it with the utmost respect. I want to learn more about it. I have educated myself up to a point where I know what I'm putting myself to. So I think it is a very fine line, but personally, and especially when it comes to writing, I would hate for stories to be wasted because people were afraid to touch anything, as much as I would hate it if people just twist something until it's completely something else. If you want to write about God, you can create your own. Don't just claim, for example, that Hades was like that or Hercules was like that and go against what we know. But again, in literature, retelling's very, very difficult to know if you're happy or not happy with them. Usually I found myself being very unhappy unless it's Stephen Fry, because Stephen Fry just narrates it. It doesn't seem like he's trying to change it. So it's why I would go with one of his books, for example. So someone who's narrating the mythology in his own words rather than, oh, I'm writing a book about Achilles, for example, and I'm making it very, very different to what it was. So yeah, very, very difficult topic, but at least that's where I stand on it. But I would rather try something aware of what it is rather than, going around thinking, oh, it's Halloween, I will put on something and, be very disrespectful. It can be very extreme as well.
Yeah. I think it's a sign of the current times, this disease that you have to be very careful when you speak about some other culture. Let's just go back to the 19th century. I think at least 50% of what Nietzsche wrote was about Greece. And that was fine. Nietzsche was writing about Greek mythology, Greek philosophy, Greek culture, Greek politics, Greek this, Greek that, and he made his works out of it. And he is one of the most amazing thinkers of the human history. And it's not that I agree with everything that Nietzsche said, okay, but for sure he was deeply influenced by Greece. He was a lover of the Greek culture, and during his time, no one pointed fingers on him for drinking Greek culture. That was fine. I mean, we all knew that the philosophers from the Middle Ages, from the Renaissance, from the 19th century, they all owe a lot to the Greek thinking. So they all refer to the Greeks all the time. And that was never an issue. They would study the Greeks. They will discuss Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, you name it. And sometimes they will call out a couple of things, and sometimes they will just praise them because that was their opinion. But we live in a time that, we don't know what Greece is, so we need to be quiet. I think if we go that way, okay, we can just wipe out all the bookshelves we have. We can just destroy and bomb all the libraries and bookshops and go back to the Stone Age. Is that what we want? I don't think so, because we are very thankful for what Western civilization and other civilizations provided to us, not only ours, but I think we should be grateful that we are where we are, because our ancestors were trying to improve their conditions, their environments, and by extent we receive the fruit of those efforts. So why not take our hat off and say, okay, I'm here expressing my gratitude. I wanna, or if I'm not that happy, let's say with the way that philosophy went with Descartes, you can always argue about it. You don't need to be French. I understand that. The only thing I understand is some of the works, they don't get properly translated. And I know people, for instance, who are like, I don't speak German, okay, but I know people who do, and they read the likes of Nietzsche, Heidegger, Hegel, Kant. I'm talking about philosophy now in the original language, and they argue that what we receive, it's not exactly what was the thinking of those guys. When I hear that, I say nothing, because my knowledge of German language is very small. So you gotta be humble. You gotta you got to understand, like, how far can you go with your comments, and when is your time to learn. But overall, I think as creators, I think we should have free pass, as you said, Maria, with a degree of respect. That's simple.
But like, imagine if the Romans were not allowed to be influenced by Greece. Where would technology be these days? For hundreds or if not thousands of years, Roman technology was unsurpassed. If we had this thing of, but we can't say anything about Greek philosophy, we need to leave it untouched because we're not Greek, or we cannot base our gods or our alphabet. What would have happened without the Greeks got it from the Phoenicians, the Romans got it from the Greeks. Like, you cannot, it's this exchange that helps humanity progress, I guess. Of course, it has to be respectful, but like in that example, for example, what would bother me is, it's, I think, a very good thing that the Romans were so inspired by Greece. It also meant that at the time, that they left us alone. They didn't bother us as much as they did other countries. They have other places they have conquered. But like, what bothers me is someone saying, the Roman gods were original. No, their pagan gods were original. Janus and all the rest of their gods, Venus and were the equivalent of the Greek gods. So that, for example, I would find disrespectful, someone not having the knowledge for it. But then it all circles back to education. If you're educated enough, or if you make a point to educate yourself for certain things, I think that wipes out the possibilities of being disrespectful. If you make a choice, to give a try for another culture. And as a writer as well, I at the moment, I don't have, a big oeuvre that contains things for so many different cultures that I can write about. If I am inspired by something, I'm making it in a way that it's not like, I'm not writing about Japan, for example. There's a ritual, for example, that I might find interesting, and I will try to encompass. I will get inspired by it. I will give it a different form. I will tweak it to how it works for me, but it's no longer Japanese, and I'm not going to present it as Japanese. It's where you get being influenced by something is very, very different than taking it and twisting it around and say, the Japanese actually did that, for example. It is very difficult to navigate around it, but I'm very pro exchange, but you'd have to make a point to educate yourself on it and listen to people. Like, for example, if I write something and it offends someone from a certain culture, I'd still want to listen to them and understand why was this offensive to you, why you think I should not have written this. And it's something that, to be honest with you, because exactly I write fantasy and I get inspired, even if I think of something and I've never seen it in another culture. Maybe I don't remember seeing it, but I don't know. Maybe I wrote something about the Sumerians, for example. I don't remember reading it, but maybe that's where I, got it from in theory. So it's very difficult to be sure that you're inventing something original. So I think the best thing you can do was just let it inspire you, but not take it as it was, put it and present it as a completely different thing.
Jeroen, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think I would be like, I think that, you have to a certain extent. I think when you're writing, you should be able to have a certain amount of free license, right? And I say that with a massive caveat, and that caveat is with respect, right? So to me, if you can't say it to someone's face, then don't write it, right? So if you can't turn around to somebody and say what it is that you're writing, then you can't write it. Do you get me? So, like, I think, you have to be, because especially in these days, we're going to insult somebody in some way, somehow, right? Because everybody is there to be insulted, right? Or to be, I don't know, disrespected or whatever else. So we can't think like that. We have to think like, well, I'm going to write it like I'm going to write it, but I'm going to write it with respect, right? Respect for those people, or for that situation, or for that, whatever cultural phenomenon, whatever it is that you're going to do. But like Maria, I think the culture is there to be shared, and everybody's culture is there to be shared. And you can pick and choose bits of culture from other things and other societies and go, do you know what, that's pretty cool, or whatever, but as long as you write it with respect, right? And I would add to what Maria was saying about education. If you educate yourself about something and you make your mind up about whatever it is that it is, and you've really done some research into it, then you can go ahead and you can write it in my terms. You know what I mean? And even if it is becoming where somebody goes, I'm insulted by that, that's taken my, whatever. Well, then let's talk about it. What is it that has so insulted you? I never meant to insult you. I was trying to be respectful to you, or to your whatever it is that it is. But you can't be like in this kind of empty void that we live in this society that we're in, where you can't say anything about anybody because everybody's going to get insulted. Well, sorry. Do you know what I mean? That's kind of, do you know what I mean? Like I really believe that as a writer and as a creative person, you've got to be able to be allowed to say what it is that you feel, or to say what it is you think, as long as it's done with a modicum of respect. And as long as you can say it to somebody, to their face, then you can write it, If you can't say it to somebody, well, then you shouldn't be writing it. It's as simple as that, and there's cultural approach, like everybody is taking little bits of everybody else's culture all the time. That's just the world we live in. That's the human nature as well. Also, we're trying to learn about other people or other cultures, or let's say Greek mythology, or whatever it is. We're maybe trying to learn, or we have a fascination with Japan, for example, right? So in trying to learn, you're trying to educate yourself. You're trying to gain, more information, let's say. But you've got to be careful about it, and you can't go out to disrespect somebody, or to take away their rights. But you can't be also all the time sort of, let's say, politically correct. You know what I mean? You gotta write what you feel. And you've got to have that license, that freedom to say, yeah, this is what I feel. And maybe I'm not totally educated on it, and maybe I'm not totally right on it, and maybe you have a different opinion. Let's talk about it. Let's not just go, I'm insulted by that. Well, so you are, you know what I mean? Why are you insulted? Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I said something wrong, but I have to be allowed to say it. I have to be free to say what it is that I think, about whatever. And I just think that a lot of the time now, we have to be so careful about what it is that we say or what it is that we like. Really, you know what I mean? Everybody's going to get insulted sometime, you know, and everybody's going to feel that their toes have been stood on. And oh, you said this. Yeah, I said that because I thought it, and I have to be free to be able to think it. You mightn't agree with me, but that doesn't mean that I can't say it, you know. But I always have the premise, and again, the same thing. I don't have a huge amount of work where it involves, let's say, other people's cultures, you know, that kind of thing. But in my thinking is always, can I say it to someone's face? And if I can say it to someone's face, you know, without kind of, you know, going, oh my God, I'm about to, you know, if I can say it, I can write it. You know, it's quite simple. And we have to be free to think like we're going to think and to write like we're going to write and not be always afraid, oh God, somebody's going to feel very offended by that. Well, you know, everybody's going to get offended. Do you know what I mean? Like, get used to it.
Maybe it's, and maybe everyone is not a bad thing, because if you write and your writing is innocuous, maybe it's not good writing, because there must be some degree of impact. You don't want to write and things remain the same. Of course, I'm not saying writing for the sake of insulting, but if I have to pick between writing and nothing happens and writing and someone is angry about it, I go for the latter. For the latter. I'm sorry, because otherwise, why do I write? Because you want to write with the objective of seeing some effects. It's like every single action of yours, you do it with a purpose. Like